A few years ago, when my kids were 3 and 7, we were looking for a new car for my wife. After scouring Auto Trader, we're in the UK, we saw a Mazda Zedos 6, decent mileage, couple of owners, in a small traders down south. It was about an hour away, so we hopped in my car and went to look at it. We arrived at the site, which had some decent-looking cars, and it was a nice and tidy place, so didn't ring any alarm bells. We were greeted by one of 2 Romanian brothers who seemed knowledgeable and pretty free of the hard sell. I had a look round the car, very little rust, oil looked clean, tidy inside with not too much wear. The only 2 things I found was the head unit panel was not in place correctly, and one of the brackets by the engine had a bit of a dent in it, but it was a non-functional bracket, and it didn't appear to have a prang, so okay. Took it for a test drive, and it was okay. My wife liked it, so we paid part cash, part card. A few days later, after sorting the insurance, we went and collected it. By the time we got home, my wife got out and immediately said, "There's something wrong with this car." I took it for a drive, and yes, it had low power, sounded terrible, and didn't feel safe. I immediately rang them and they were pleasant enough and said bring it back and they would have their garage look at it. The same garage that had motted it barely 2 weeks earlier. I said I didn't want to bring it back and would pay out of my pocket to get it assessed by my garage. They didn't like this, but I didn't give them a choice. After a couple of days of being at my local garage, who we have used for years and trust, even though they are a bit pricey, we got the report. It ran to 2 pages, which I will summarize using the comment the mechanic gave us when we picked it up. Mechanically, this is the worst car I have ever seen. How it passed an MOT is beyond me. You wouldn't have seen it on a visual inspection, but this is a nail. Oh dear. So I rang the dealer and sent them the report. Again, pleasant enough, said bring it back and we can discuss it and sort out the refund. Kui the MC. So the following Saturday, now 1.5 weeks since we bought it, we all trooped back down there and walked into their little Portakabin office. The 2 brothers were sat there with faces like slapdasses. "I will tell you now, sir, you will not be getting a refund today, not until our garage has checked it." My wife and I looked at each other and our hearts sank. What followed was an hour of back and forth, with me explaining that we were within our rights to a full refund within 30 days of purchase. Now this is true for goods in the UK, but I had no idea if this applied to vehicles. After an hour, my wife and I stepped outside. The kids were getting bored and fractious. "What are we going to do?" says my wife. "Well, I'm not leaving without a refund," I said. "Agreed." And that was it. We went back into that office, we argued back and forth, revisited the same point over and over while the kids moaned, cried, begged to leave. But we sat there and we argued, very calmly, very matter-of-factly, without getting angry or raising our voices. At a couple of points, one brother left to serve people who had walked into the yard, and at one point he came in with another couple who were interested in a car. They heard us talking. I slyly shook my head at the couple, and they backtracked and left. One of the brothers was raging behind his eyes. They threatened to call the police. I begged them to do it so we could clear this up and leave. They didn't. After, and I am not exaggerating, 5 hours of this, my wife and I stepped out and were stood just outside the office door. "Look, we can't stay here much longer. The kids are hungry and tired and mental," my wife says. I saw the door open barely an inch. "Okay, take my car and go and feed them. I'm not leaving. I think I'll just call the police and get this sorted, but if I have to stay here until tomorrow morning, we are getting our money back." I said. I noticed the door close again. "Really?" she said. "Just give it a minute, let's go back in a sec." "Okay," she says, looking irritated. We go back in, and one brother is counting out cash on the table. At this point, it's early evening. "Sir, the deal we will do is, we will give you a full refund if you don't mention this car on any review site. It was X in cash and X on a card, yes?" Less than 5 minutes later, we were back in our car, leaving the nail behind, cash in hand, and card refunded. We had found a pub that does food, and were heading there rapidly. The kids were okay now they knew food was near. With everything sorted, my wife and I looked at each other for a second and cheered, whooped, hollered, banged the steering wheel, making the little lad cry, bless him. We could not believe that after 5 hours of back and forth, crying kids, belligerent salesmen, we had won. We had flipping well won. This sort of thing never happened to us, and yet there we were. We felt like the kings of the world and no one would ever mess with us.
I bought a car for my son. Went to a dealership thinking they would stand behind a used car. Big nope. Timing belt broke and ruined the engine 2 days after the 30-day warranty. They said it was on my receipt as IS. They were very rude and said if I had spent more money, I could have had a better car. I spent $7,000. I called an attorney and they said there was nothing I could do. So I waited for an engine that would have a 6-month warranty. A few months later, still no engine. I decided to buy the engine with the 30-day warranty because school was starting and my son needed his car. $3,500 for used engine. Guess what? 32 days later, the engine locked up and would not move. I tried my best to reason with the mechanic, but no use. He wasn't having it. So I left the car there while trying to see my options. After 3 days, the mechanic calls and says he is going to charge by the day if I don't come get the car. The car that is not drivable. I sold the car to Pull Apart, a company that will come, get the car, and sell for parts. I received $350 for it. It was a 2014 Hyundai Santa Fe, immaculate inside and out, but I will never buy from that dealership again. Was not a Hyundai dealer, and I will never buy a Hyundai again either. We had that car for 285 days, and he was only able to drive the car 14 days out of the 285 days. I ended up buying him an Acura, and he loves it, and it's been a great car for him. I just bought a new car for myself since my other son totaled my Odyssey. I went by the dealership and parked my new car. Every salesman came running out wanting to sell me a car or wanting me to trade in my very expensive new car. I said, "Oh, I just had to pull in here to make a phone call." The salesman that sold me the crap car recognized me. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Money was not the problem with the car I bought my son. Trust was the problem, and you will never get another sale from our family again." He slivered away. As I was driving away, I saw a couple of salesmen animatedly talking to him, I guess trying to find out how he peed me off. Later found out he was fired.
Wow, thanks for the comments. A lot of people are saying I should name and shame. You are right, I probably should have, but I didn't, and it was 5 years ago. So I can't even remember the name of the place or the garage where the MOT was done. I can't imagine they stayed in business long, TBH.